The business cabin holds its breath, the way a conference room does, before a vote. Brass trim breathes quietly under soft light. Leather sighs when a briefcase is nudged an inch. Espresso blooms from the galley with a bitter edge that promises service as smooth as glass. So long as everyone remembers the order of things, Andre sits in seat 3 Alpha, with a folded newspaper resting on the tray. He is not reading it. He is listening to the cabin's grammar, a zipper's rasp, a cufflink's tap, the polite hush a flight attendant uses when telling a passenger that something he wants is not available. He notes how the cart pauses for a watch that announces itself, then glides past his row without friction. He does not raise a hand. He lets the omission write itself into the air, a line in a ledger that never admits it exists. The chief flight attendant arrives with posture pressed into perfect lines. His smile is professional and careful, the kind that sits on the face like a badge and never warms the eyes. He says that the premium section is reserved for established business travelers and tells Andre to collect his things and move to the economy section at once. The word "at once" rings like the edge of a glass tapped by a spoon. Andre looks up without hurry. He says that his reservation is confirmed and that he has purchased seat 3 Alpha. His tone does not climb. He offers the boarding pass open on his palm, the paper crisp, the name and seat clearly printed. The chief glances but does not actually read. The way one glances at a nuisance. He says that the airline needs this seat for a priority customer, and that they are happy to accommodate Andre elsewhere on the aircraft. He lets the words priority and accommodate do the heavy lifting, as if courtesy can move a contract. Andre folds the pass once, aligns the corners, and sets it on the armrest. He says that he intends to remain in the seat he purchased. The calm in his voice is not detachment. It is discipline. It states a boundary and lets silence protect it. A man arrives with the energy of someone who has never been kept waiting. Tall, tailored charcoal, polished shoes that click the aisle into orderly attention. He fills the space with the certainty of familiarity. His briefcase is the kind that looks new no matter how far it travels. His presence gathers eyes the way a magnet gathers filings. He asks where his seat is, and the question is not a question. It is the announcement of an expectation. The chief flight attendant warms immediately. The shoulders loosen. The smile becomes alive. He says that there is a minor seating issue, and that the usual seat will be available momentarily. The man's gaze travels the cabin and lands on Andre. Confusion flares, then irritation. He says that the seat is his. As if habit were a deed, Andre lifts the boarding pass again between two fingers, and then places it back. He says that according to his boarding pass, the seat belongs to him today. The sentence is a hinge that does not creak. Nearby, a woman in row 2 Bravo stops, scrolling for a heartbeat. A man in row 4 Charlie leans back as if to remove himself from the frame, then leans forward again with reluctant curiosity. The ventilation hums, and the hum sounds like the word neutral. The suited man says that there has been a mistake. He explains to the chief that he sits in seat 3 Alpha every Tuesday, and that it is in his profile. The chief nods with relief, like a corridor has opened. He says that they are working to resolve the issue immediately. Andre replies mildly and asks if by resolve they mean moving the person who purchased the seat so that another can remain where he prefers to be. The words he uses are purchased and assigned and contract. They are not heat, they are weight. The cabin manager arrives. She is neat as a checklist. Her expression is composed and even. She asks what the issue is, and the chief says that the man with the profile is meant to be in 3 Alpha, and that the system assigned the seat to Mr. Wilson. The manager apologizes for the inconvenience, and Andre says there is no inconvenience, because he is seated in the place his ticket assigns. She says they have flexibility. She offers compensation and premium services in another seat. She speaks of cooperation and courtesy and keeping the cabin comfortable for everyone. Her language wears a silk lining. His language keeps it steel. Andre thanks her for the offer and declines. He says again that he will remain in the seat he purchased. The suited man exhales through his nose in a short burst that sounds like a laugh learning how to be a snarl. He says that he spends an enormous amount of money with this airline. He does not say contract. He says loyalty and status and history. He says them the way a lock says. It recognizes a key. Andre turns his head and regards him fully at last. He says that the booking system accepted his purchase and issued this seat. He does not decorate the thought. He does not remove its armor. The suited man leans in, and the clean citrus of his shaving cream reaches Andre's nose. He says that if Andre makes him late, he can make Andre's life expensive. The threat is quiet. It has no exclamation in it. It wears a suit. Andre feels his heartbeat surface and count once at the base of his fingers where they rest on the armrest. He presses the fingertips into leather, and the beat dissolves back into his chest. He does not reply to the threat. He replies to the rule. He says that he is sitting in his assigned seat. The manager shifts to a new angle, earnestness turned pragmatic. She says that prioritizing valued customers is part of their service model, and that she would appreciate his help. Andre asks whether that means some reservations are less valid than others. She says it is understood and does not say where it is stated. The silence after her answer is not empty. It contains the sound of ice settling in a glass in the galley, and the soft click of a latch somewhere overhead, and the quiet breath of a nearby passenger who has just decided to record. Andre opens his phone. He does not hurry and he does not hesitate. He taps the voice recorder, and the screen breathes a red line. The chief says that recording crew is against policy. Andre says that recording personal interactions in a public cabin is permitted. He says that he has checked the policy before purchase. He chooses the word policy and the phrase before purchase on purpose. He places them on the table like measured instruments and lets them gleam there. This is a small payoff, and the cabin feels it. The woman in 2 Bravo stops pretending to scroll and frames the scene openly now. The man in 4 Charlie looks away from the safety card because the only safety procedure that matters is happening in front of him. In the rows behind, a whisper moves like a low tide. Someone says he is right under a breath, not meant to travel far. It travels anyway. The chief says that Andre is creating a hostile environment. Andre replies that hostility is asking a customer to surrender a purchased seat. He keeps his voice low enough to be intimate and clear enough to be official. He lets the room hear both registers. The manager attempts a new offer. She promises a complimentary upgrade on the next 3 flights, regardless of fare, a large portion of miles, premium meal service in the new seat. Andre says that the offer is generous and that this is not about compensation. The suited man snaps that real business waits in San Francisco, and Andre answers that principles are not negotiable. The sentence is soft and it lands hard. The chief straightens. He says they cannot delay departure for one uncooperative passenger. He reaches for a handset and speaks into it with clipped precision. Security to the jet bridge. He says it as if reading a clock. The words move through the cabin like a sudden breeze, turning a few heads and confirming the audience for those who were waiting to see how the story would be told. Andre does not raise his voice. He does not move in a way that can be misread. He reaches once more for his phone, checks that the recording is running, and places the device face up on the tray, so the red line is visible to anyone who needs to be reminded that the contract has ears now. The first officer from airport security appears at the door, backlit by terminal white, and does not hurry down the aisle. This is not a sprint. It is a procession. Every step is a question about authority and process and the order of words. The manager looks from the officer to the chief. The triangle holds for a second. Andre sits inside it like a still center. He senses the tiny tremor at the edge of his hand again and presses the seam of the armrest with his fingertips. Until the body remembers that composure is a choice, he keeps choosing it. Around him, the public shifts. The woman in 2 Bravo lifts her phone high without apology now. The man in 4 Charlie smooths his tie, and then stops smoothing and watches 2 passengers whisper to each other. One says, "Just move," and the other says, "Why should he?" And the words collide and settle, and then do something more interesting. They divide the cabin into those who prefer comfort and those who prefer rules. It turns out that many people prefer rules when they are being watched. The chief tells the officer that there is a non-compliant passenger in 3 Alpha. The term is chosen because it travels well. Andre stays seated and lets it pass him like a draft. He glances down toward the inside pocket of his jacket. The platinum card rests there in its slot, cool and small. He feels its weight, the way one feels a memory that could be used like a tool. He leaves it where it is. Power is not proof today. Proof is proof. He closes the pocket with a quiet touch and returns his hand to the armrest. His eyes return to the officer who now steps into the light of the cabin. Andre thinks of all the rooms where the conversation turns on who gets to define the rule and who has to obey the tone. He thinks of missed sleep and long corridors, and a last hug that should have been longer and was not because someone decided a ticket could be doubted by a glance. He inhales and lets the breath leave his body, as if air itself were a record of choice. The cabin listens. It listens to the hum of the vents and the light tick of ice and the soft slide of a camera lens. It listens to the word purchased and to the word assigned and to the word policy. It listens to the idea that language can be a lever and that the smallest lever can move the heaviest thing when placed under the right point. The officer arrives at the row. The manager meets his eyes, and something unspoken passes between them. A calculation about safety and balance and the public record. The officer asks what the situation is, and the chief repeats his phrase. Andre does not look away. He does not add heat. He adds clarity. He says that he is sitting in the seat he purchased, and that he is complying with every safety instruction. He says that the request to move is not about safety or balance. He uses the word balance with care. He places it where it belongs and leaves it there. The officer studies the faces. He studies the red line on the phone. He studies the unblinking lens of a passenger a row ahead. He studies the manager's silence. He studies the chief's insistence. He studies the suited man's posture and the briefcase that looks like a promise. He does not make a move yet. Andre rests both hands on the armrests. The leather is warm now under his palms. He is a stillness in a system that prefers motion. The cabin holds the stillness alongside its appetite for resolution. And in that held space, a small shift occurs. Not a cheer, not a speech. A set of eyes harden in thought here. A phone lifts there. A shoulder in row 4 eases because the truth of the rule is starting to feel heavier than the habit of comfort. The chapter ends where a hinge turns. The officers stand. The manager finds her breath. The chief holds his posture like armor. The suited man looks at his watch, and then at Andre. Andre does not give the card in his pocket the power to speak for him. He lets the contract speak in the words he has chosen. Purchased, assigned, policy. He waits for the rules to walk the last few feet to meet him. The aisle does not widen when the officers arrive. The plane keeps its narrow throat and asks everyone to choose their words carefully. Andre sits back into the contour of seat 3 Alpha and lets the leather hold his weight. The manager stands with her tablet tucked to her side. The chief, with his smile, reset to professional. The officer, with his hands folded just above the belt. Richard hovers in the aisle as if proximity itself should change the rule. Andre's phone lies face up on the tray with the recorder already working. The red bar crawls left to right like a patient heartbeat, and each second drops clean into the stack. He has nothing to hide from the room, and he wants the room to see that. The phone is not an ornament, it is a witness. The officer asks whether Andre will follow any instruction that relates to safety. The tone is even, the sentence carefully built. Andre answers with the same clarity. He says that he will comply with any instruction made for safety or balance. He uses the word balance because in aviation that word is a key that fits only one door. The manager exhales when she hears it. The chief does not. Richard leans closer and lowers his voice to a private edge. He says he can make Andre's life expensive if he insists on making Richard late. Andre does not react to the bait. He answers the premise rather than the threat. He says he knows what he paid for. The sentence is short and unadorned. It is a line drawn with a ruler. He lifts his thumb and brings a second app forward. The display goes from the steady red bar to a plain gray banner and a single line of text. Protocol 7 in progress. The moment is quiet enough that the words seem to settle into the air. No beeps, no covert histories. He leaves the screen up so anyone glancing down will see what he is doing and what the time is doing with him. It is not a secret chess move. It is the beginning of a timeline. He is not only holding his seat, he is building a record that cannot be argued down into opinion. The chief repeats his phrase about non-compliance, as if repetition can sculpt a legal shape. Andre answers with process language that keeps cutting the sentence back to size. Purchased, assigned, policy, safety, balance. He uses those few words the way a mechanic uses a set of calibrated gauges. They are not emotional. They are precise. The manager asks the officer for a moment and slips toward the forward galley to consult the cockpit. She uses consult because it is the word that invites thinking rather than orders. Andre appreciates the choice. He shifts his gaze to the window to give the aisle a breath. The morning light angles across the engine cowl and turns it into a simple sheen. Then the sheen becomes a thin line near the wing root, amber against the gray. He holds the picture in his head without declaring a conclusion. A mechanic once told him that color tells the first truth in a leak. Water is shy. Oil is stubborn. Hydraulic fluid speaks with a honeyed glare. He watches for another breath, and that line thickens by a hair and grows glossy under the sun like a lip. He presses the call button with his index finger and waits. The sound is soft and domestic, a doorbell in a neat house. The chief arrives wearing the same steel smile. Andre points to the window. He does not raise his voice. He does not change his posture. He describes what he sees in plain terms. A fluid line near the left engine housing, amber in color, growing in length and width, with a shine that is inconsistent with condensation. The words are not meant to impress. They are meant to trigger the correct rule. The chief glances once and labels it condensation out of habit. Andre does not argue. He adds one more sentence in the same neutral tone. He says that he reviewed their policy before purchase and that reporting potential safety issues is encouraged. This is not a debate about opinion. It is a documented expectation Then he stops. He does not try to win with volume. He aims at the rule. The manager returns before the chief can dismiss him again. She follows his finger and watches the amber streak fatten under a clean square of light. She does not perform disbelief. She nods. She says she will inform the captain now. Andre feels the cabin take a small step toward truth. It is not loud. The woman in 2 Bravo steadies her phone and tips the lens a degree to catch the window. The man in 4 Charlie sets his jaw and looks as if he has decided exactly whose side he prefers to be on. Richard checks his watch with a flick that does not move the sun. The officer waits without pushing. He is smart enough to let the right process find its footing. Andre breathes once and looks at the phone again. A new banner sits above the red bar. Acknowledgement received. Timeline active. The letters are small, clean, and free of drama. Somewhere, his team has seen his first line and is now watching for the next one. He leaves the screen where it is. Screen up. Evidence visible. If anyone asks later why he did not shout, the answer will be that he did not need to. He spoke in policy, and he published time. The manager steps to the handset at the forward door. The captain's voice arrives over the cabin speakers a moment later. The calm that comes from hours in weather and in checklists. The captain says they have been notified of a potential maintenance concern and will hold the departure as a precaution. Maintenance will verify. The sentence is short and procedural. It does not apologize for caring about gravity. Andre watches the small set of muscles at the chief's jaw tighten and release. He looks back to the window. The amber line now draws a faint tear along the panel seam. The sun makes it look like a wire under skin. A ground crew member kneels and follows it with his eyes. Another arrives with a rag and a small flashlight, then stops touching things, then radios in a few words that Andre cannot hear but understands anyway. Someone outside is moving from denial to verification. It always looks the same when people do it right. Their hands slow down, and their eyes get brighter. Richard cannot let the moment sit. He leans in again and asks whether the airline realizes who is losing time. Andre does not look up from the window. He does not take the bait. He replies to the premise again. He says he knows what he paid for. The words land like a hammer on one nail. He will not be passed to a different task. The manager returns to their row. The officer steps back to make space. The chief holds his place as if it were a post. The manager speaks low but clearly. She says the captain has elected to hold the push and request a maintenance inspection. She addresses Andre by name and thanks him for bringing the observation forward. She does not attempt to fold the thanks into a new invitation to move. She has learned in less than 10 minutes what her training should have made obvious at the beginning. Respect is not a voucher, it is a rule. Andre nods once. He keeps his voice level. He says thank you for taking it seriously. He says the phrase as if she has just saved time rather than lost it. In safety work, the most expensive seconds are the ones someone refused to spend early. The phone buzzes again, and he lets it be. He no longer needs to read every banner. The timeline is not his alone anymore. It belongs to the system he turned on with a line, and to every person in the cabin who is now quietly choosing to be a witness. He lifts his eyes and catches the edge of his own reflection in the window. The jacket sits clean across his shoulders. The inside pocket is a neat rectangle against his chest. The platinum card lives there like a promise of an easier path. He leaves it untouched. The point is not to win by flashing a key. The point is to force the door to be opened by the posted hours. The ground crew stepladder rolls into place. A mechanic climbs with the kind of calm you only see in people who are allowed to deal with truth without politics. He crouches, follows the line with a light, and then does the small shoulder movement of someone who has resolved uncertainty into knowledge. He signals with 2 fingers and then with a flat palm, the language of stop. The captain returns on the speaker. The voice is still calm. The decision is firmer now. For safety, we will require maintenance verification before departure. We appreciate your patience. The words are almost the same as before, and that is how you know they are real. They are not flourished. They are repeated. Richard sighs again. Louder, the sound designed to remind anyone within earshot that time is money. The cabin does not reward him for it. The woman in 2 Bravo lowers her phone and looks at Andre, not with fandom, not with pity, but with acknowledgement. The man in 4 Charlie folds his arms and watches the door to the jet bridge, as if it were a stage on which a better kind of play might arrive. The chief speaks once more in the voice that used to work for him. He says that Andre's report came after a disagreement over a seat and implies that the timing is interesting. Andre does not defend himself. He repeats the same 4 words that have carried him through the chapter: purchased, assigned, policy, safety. He lets the officer hear the cadence and choose. The officer nods once and says nothing. It is the most supportive thing he can do in uniform. Andre's breathing stays even. The earlier tremor that ran into his fingers when Richard hissed the price of defiance is gone. It did not leave because the room softened. It left because he continued to choose composure as a strategy rather than a mood. Composure is not a talent. It is a repeated act that creates a shape. He glances at the recorder again and watches the seconds stack. The red bar does not care about status. It does not remember who is important on Tuesdays. It remembers what entered the microphone and when. The first mechanic steps into the cabin with a small tablet under his arm and confers with the manager in a tone just above a whisper. Andre catches only the words hydraulic and verify and not flying like this. The manager's eyes flick to Andre without apology. She nods once and returns to the handset. Andre says nothing. He does not lift the card from his pocket. He does not offer the officer a summary speech about principle. He keeps showing the room the difference between entitlement and process. Entitlement insists. Process records and escalates to the right rule. The captain comes back on the speaker and says the words that turn the page without forcing it. Precautionary hold. Maintenance will verify. The cabin breathes out as a single animal. It is not relief. It is recognition. The argument about who belongs in what seat has been displaced by a higher concern that belongs to everyone. That is the point of rules that mean something. They lift us out of pettiness and into shared survival. Andre rests his hands on the armrests again and lets his palms warm the leather. Outside, the amber line swells and shines and says in its own language that Andre was correct to insist on the higher rule. Inside, the phone keeps its red pulse, the banner keeps its clean text, and the room keeps watching the difference between status and evidence do the slow work of embarrassing a system into behaving. He looks once more at his reflection and at the pocket with the platinum edge hidden under cloth. He leaves it alone. He has no need for the shortcut today. He wants the long path to be visible to the camera and to the officer, and to anyone in this cabin who has ever been told that the way to be heard is to borrow someone else's name. The manager meets the officer's eye and nods toward the door. The officer steps aside to make space for the mechanic who needs to come through again. Richard shifts his weight and scowls at his watch as if it has betrayed him by obeying physics. Andre returns his gaze to the wing and waits for verification to keep unfolding in plain view. The scene does not explode. It tightens. It becomes clean. The phone's red bar continues. The mechanic returns with a firmer set to his mouth, and the captain speaks a final time to say they will deplane to complete inspection. The chapter closes on the sound of buckles popping and the soft chorus of people gathering their things while looking at Andre with a new, quiet understanding. They are not grateful for the delay. They are grateful for the rule being allowed to speak. The gate area holds its own weather after a flight aborts. Air that should rush toward a door now hangs in a bright stillness. People cluster in small rings that open and close depending on who speaks. The public address system feeds a calm sentence every few minutes and then returns to a low electrical hum. Andre stands at the edge of this weather with his phone face up in his palm and the recording file alive. He is not hiding the witness. He wants the witness to be seen. The mechanic returns first. The one who knelt under the wing. He carries a small, clear bag that looks like a medical sample kit. Inside is a swipe of liquid the color of old honey. The bag shines under the gate, lights the way truth shines when it is finally given plastic and a seal. He does not raise it like a trophy. He holds it level like a fact. The manager meets him at the counter. The agent straightens a clipboard without being told. The mechanic places the sealed bag beside the clipboard and slides a tablet next to it. The camera in Andre's mind moves close without his feet moving at all. He watches the ritual unfold in steps that belong to law as much as to maintenance. The pouch's printed barcode aligns with a field on the form. The agent reads the code aloud and then reads the flight number and the time. The mechanic confirms each line. The pen bites the paper and leaves a short, hard sound behind each name. The sound is small and final and exquisite. Chain of custody begins as ink before it becomes consequence. He notes each detail because noting is his work. The amber shade, the firmness of the signature, the way the agent places the form so that the next signature will sit beneath the last with no space for improvisation. He does not feel triumph. He feels the sensation that comes when a problem picks up its true name and begins to move on its own toward remedy. The manager makes an announcement that is shorter than the ones before. She says an active hydraulic leak has been identified and that the aircraft will remain out of service until inspection and repair are complete. She does not apologize for the caution. She does not sweeten the language. The room hears the difference. Argument has become procedure. Emotion has become process. People do not cheer. They adjust their bags and their faces and begin to speak in the future tense again. Richard steps into the lane between the counter and the crowd as if the space belongs to him by memory. He says he will be speaking to senior executives, and he uses two first names as if they were keys on a ring. The officer who kept his hands folded through the earlier storm looks at him with a steady neutrality that feels like a railing when you have been walking on air. He says, "There is no policy for first names. There is only verification and safety and time." The words carry no malice. They carry the weight of rails. The sentence lands where it needs to. Richard blinks as if the light changed. He half turns toward Andre as if a private duel might still be available, then sees the screens and the phones and the bag with the amber line inside it, and understands that the room has moved on without him. He is still important to himself. The system is now loyal to proof. The woman from row 2 approaches Andre with her phone lowered but still ready. She tells him she filmed because the record matters. She corrects herself and makes the thought cleaner. She filmed because truth matters, and truth needs records when memory is pressured. He nods with the small economy he has used all morning. He does not make her his ally. He allows her to be a citizen. The man from row 4 stands a little behind Andre as if he has found a natural post there. He does not speak. He surveys the faces of the staff the way a manager surveys a floor. When a process changes, he is not looking for villain. He is counting signs of learning. He seems satisfied. Andre does not put his platinum card on the counter. The card presses a neat rectangle against the inside lining of his jacket. It will remain a rectangle. It is not that he distrusts leverage. He is building leverage that will not require a reveal to work. His phone vibrates once, and he reads a quiet line. Timeline synchronized. External recordings detected. He leaves the screen up. Screen up keeps the machine honest, because the human saw it too. The mechanic on the tablet looks toward Andre and offers a short nod that acknowledges the observation without making ceremony of it. Andre returns the nod with equal economy. Respect is a better tool than thanks when work has just begun. A second mechanic arrives with a small case and a printout. He places the case down and removes a fresh seal. The printed form is a custody record with boxes already checked for description and location. He initials the place where the bag will pass from one set of hands to another. The pen marks the page with that same small punch that Andre has already learned to love. The manager initials under his line and writes the time in careful handwriting. The agent stamps the corner with a red impression that looks like an emblem. The sound of the stamp is a private thunder in a quiet storm. The room does not know to applaud, but the room understands that reality has taken a seat. Richard tries a different angle. He complains about the delay and the cost, and speaks the old language of grievance from rank. The chief, who began the day with an easy smile and a short fuse, watches the ritual and does not step back into the center. His posture has learned the price of assumption. The manager keeps her attention on the mechanics. The officer stands where he was and allows the room to read the hierarchy of this moment without being told. Safety first, verification next, reputation later. Andre feels the small thrum that visited his fingers earlier. Try to return and then fade again. It leaves because his body remembers the discipline he has been practicing since he was a student, learning to sit through insult without losing math. He is not gloating, he is not relieved, he is engaged. He keeps listening for what comes next, because winning a point is not the point. Building a record is. The agent reads a new instruction off her screen and announces the gate for a replacement aircraft. The crowd ripples toward hope. Plans start again. Children pivot back to the business of being children. A man laughs once at something on his phone and then lowers his head, as if he has committed a small rudeness. The manager steps back from the counter and approaches Andre. Her voice carries gratitude and something like self-correction. Thank you for insisting on the higher rule. He nods once. He does not say you are welcome. He says, facts were there. He says it softly, so the sentence does not become a weapon. The sentence is, for alignment. The woman from row 2 lifts her phone again briefly and captures the sealed bag and the clipboard and the signatures and the small stamped emblem. She moves her lens without hurry. The man from row 4 positions himself so that her shot is not blocked by people passing between seats. The network that protects truth is not a company. It is a habit people share when they are given the chance. Andre adds a line to his note. Sample collected. Custody initiated. He does not garnish the words. He lets the record sit clean. He knows that later the lines can be stacked against an opposing narrative, and that the simplicity will do the work. The chief clears his throat and says he did not mean to dismiss a safety concern. Andre looks at him without performing forgiveness. He says he understands that pressure makes people reach for familiar words. He says the procedure worked once it turned to the higher rule. He does not press the chief for a confession. He allows the system to teach him humiliation is a poor tutor. Consequence is better. A junior flight attendant in civilian clothes has been waiting at the edge of the group. She steps forward now with a lanyard visible against a plain blouse. She recites the seat reassignment clause. the way a person recites something they have had to memorize to protect themselves. Confirmed seats may only be changed for safety or weight and balance. The manager thanks her with a look that suggests that the clause will not be forced to live only in her memory anymore. It will live in practice. A printer behind the counter feeds a longer sheet, and a thicker stamp absorbs more ink before it lands. The paper curls under the red mark and then straightens as the ink dries. The manager places it under a clear mat near the edge of the counter so eyes will meet it even if hands do not. Individuals can be ignored. Stamps on public paper are harder to argue with. Richard has stopped speaking names. He scrolls his phone like a man who has temporarily run out of avenues and cannot admit it to himself. He reads a message and types with enthusiasm that has nowhere left to go. The officer whose sentence ended the name game watches him with that same neutral kindness, the kindness that holds a person responsible without needing to crush them. Andre hears a new announcement begin at a neighboring gate and end with a cheerful boarding group number. It sounds like another planet next to their suspended day. He stands a millimeter taller and breathes without counting. His mind runs inventory on the steps ahead. Replacement equipment, clean handoff to a crew that will be aware that the cabin is awake. A manager who will have to write a memo that will be read by more than the usual audience. A video that will travel exactly far enough to force serious meetings, and not so far that it becomes noise. A boardroom that will have to choose between slogans and standard. He looks at his phone and sees a quiet line in the banner again. External monitoring shows 2 uploads in progress. He thinks of the woman from row 2 and the man from row 4 and others he did not see. He thinks of the power of parallel accounts to pin a story to the wall when someone tries to move it by tone. The mechanic closes the case around the sealed bag and snaps the latches. The sound is sharp and small and deeply satisfying. The manager signs one more space and hands the clipboard to the officer who initials receipt of nothing more than presence. Even that matters. Presence that saw is part of the chain. Andra does not step closer for a better look. He has learned through long practice that restraint in the last yard is as important as discipline in the first. He keeps his hands visible and still. He allows others to see his restraint and take their cues from it. Leadership is not the same as authority. It is often the art of choosing less drama than you are entitled to. The agent announces that updates will be posted on the screen and that reboarding information will follow. People drift toward seats in 1s and 2s, and small families. The edges of the earlier conflict dissolve into the ordinary fatigue of travel. Something else remains, though, a current under the carpet. It is made of new respect for the rules that kept them on the ground today, and of a curiosity about the man who insisted on them. Without raising his voice, Andre does not correct anyone's guesses. He does not reward anyone's suspicion with a performance. He keeps his card where it is and his phone where it has been, and his attention on the hinge between safety and culture. The evidence is no longer private. It has passed through hands and stamps and the gray glass of a camera lens. It will travel to a shop and to a system and into the language of a report that executives will have to read. The personal conflict has turned into an operational truth. He steps a half pace aside, so a woman with a stroller can pass, and then returns to his place as if he were an instrument storing its case. The officer remains near but not looming. The manager speaks quietly to the chief. The mechanic disappears with the sealed bag through a door that is only for workers who wear certain shoes. The door closes and leaves behind the impression that the right people are now doing the right thing. The woman from row 2 meets Andre's eyes one last time, and gives a small nod that is not about gratitude. It is about recognition. The man from row 4 mirrors it. In their faces, he reads the public forming around a principle, not fandom, not fury, something calmer and more dangerous to bad habits. Andre glances at the jet bridge and at the empty door, and then at his phone. He adds a final line for this chapter: evidence confirmed, escalation complete. He does not press send to an audience. He files it to the place where patterns are kept until they are needed. He breathes once more and lets the room return to its usual volume. The miniature storm has passed, but the air holds a charge that will not leave with the passengers. It will go where policies live. It will make different weather there. The replacement gate begins to fill with a quieter kind of energy, the sort that moves by policy rather than panic. Andre stands a half step off the flow, phone face up in his palm. The last line in his note, cooling like ink that has set. The screens above the counter roll through arrivals and equipment assignments, and somewhere behind them a wall of offices receives calls it did not expect to take today. He keeps his shoulders easy and his breathing even. He does not reach for the card in his jacket. He has already chosen the corridor that matters. A ripple passes through the waiting area. The way wind passes over grain, heads turn toward the television strung high near the gate. The volume is low, but closed captions run a clean thread along the bottom, and the images carry their own commentary. A studio anchor sits beside a column of small rectangles that look like a dashboard. Words blink beside them in neat rows: audit, compliance, exposure. Andre raises his eyes without moving the rest of his body. He recognizes the language of after, the way institutions talk when the world becomes an affidavit. They cut to a lobby, marble, glass, the shine of success that was arranged to be photographed. A man in a tailored suit strides toward a bank of elevators. He lifts a badge to a turnstile that answers with a thin red line. The card reader blinks once, twice. Denied. He turns the card and tries again, pushing air through his nose the way schoolboys do when trying to convince physics to make room for them. The red line answers with perfect patience: denied. The camera does not tremble. Truth in public spaces seldom does. Sterling does not look at the camera because men like him are taught not to see a lens until it serves them. He looks at the turnstile, then at the receptionist who cannot help him, then at the nearest guard, whose training is a wall built of very clear blocks. The guard explains nothing. He gestures to a door where a manager will arrive to explain everything in a tone that has no room for golf words or country club words. The lobby air tightens around Sterling's shoulders. He tries the card one more time because humiliation likes a third act. The reader stays red. The guard does not change shape. The marble does not soften. A second angle floats in a corner box. An executive assistant places a fountain pen into a small cardboard box, as if setting a fragile bird down for the night. A framed photograph follows, wrapped in a sheet of clean paper and fitted along one side. She pauses and aligns the corners with a care that is almost reverent. Then she seals the lid with a strip of brown tape, passes a palm over it once, and writes a name in slow letters. It is not celebration, it is inventory. The cost is cultural, and it is counted in quiet. The anchor returns with a voice that learned to carry calm through storms. Beside her, two guests look at the dashboard of risk on a studio screen we cannot see, but we can feel by the way their eyes move. They use the new grammar out loud, the one markets learned the hard way. Reputational risk is operational risk. One says, he does not smile. He points with an open hand and names the tools that make the phrase bite: internal audits, external monitors, Pattern analysis. Chain of custody from report to remedy. The other guest adds that the Bar Association and the court have both requested records and that the Federal Bureau has been briefed where the safety piece intersects with the rest. A different world is speaking through a different mouth now, and it is not asking permission. Andre watches without leaning in. He feels the soft pulse in his fingers, try to return at the sight of the badge rejection, and then settle again. He does not gloat. He is not relieved. He is engaged. The images are not triumphs. They are calibrations. A system that had been drifting has found its compass. People nearby begin to narrate softly, because public proof invites public language. Someone says that the red light must have felt like a brick. Someone else says it looks like consequence, not revenge. The room has learned a new word in an old place. The television shifts. A legal analyst lays paper on the desk and taps a line with a capped pen. The caption carries her sentence in clean type. Oversight will request dashboards and logs, not anecdotes. She leans once toward the camera to make the shift plain. Story is what people use when they have nothing else. Evidence is what systems use when they intend to change. The anchor nods. She allows the sentence a second breath. Reputational risk is operational risk. The phrase lands with a signature snap, the sound of a stamp that has learned to live outside a back office. Across town or across an ocean, Dorothy sits at a small kitchen table under midday light that has traveled a long way to get there. She watches the same news feed on a television that lives on top of a narrow sideboard. Her hands rest on either side of a mug that never decides if it is coffee or tea. On the screen, Sterling tries the badge again because pride is not good at subtraction. The red bar refuses him with the same temper it showed a moment ago. Cameras remain honest. Dorothy does not smile. She exhales through her nose and lets her shoulders loosen a fraction. This is what it is supposed to feel like. She thinks, not triumph, alignment. The word lands inside her and makes room. She watches the assistant wrap the frame and set the pen, and she nods once. A benediction for work that had dignity before someone tried to use it to dress a lie. At the airport gate, the manager reappears from the service corridor, with the steadiness of someone who has chosen a side and intends to keep it. She confers with the agent, with the officer, with a ramp lead, who has the walk of a person who can touch airplanes and make them behave. The microphones and stamp pads and handheld scanners form a small orchestra now, each sound placed in time. Andre listens, still and ready. He is not eager for the camera to return to him. The camera has better work to do. A journalist on the television asks whether the firm will survive. The analyst answers by rotating a spreadsheet with her hand, as if guiding a ship through a narrow channel. Survival is a word for bodies, she says. Institutions either adapt or pay. We are watching payment being drafted in real time. The phrase lands with the quiet certainty of weather. They return to the dashboard and one metric glows a new color. The audience does not know the label, but they understand the hue. It is the color you use when something can no longer be postponed. The lobby feed shows Sterling in profile, while a manager speaks to him past a glass panel. The manager points to a document in a plastic sleeve, a paper mount that contains the rule like a specimen. Sterling tries to argue with a posture, a tight set of the jaw, the open hand of someone accustomed to selling his impatience as urgency. The panel does not move. The manager's finger touches a line on the document and holds it there until the air understands. The camera finds the assistant again. She adds a brass nameplate to the box, turns it once, as if confirming a last detail, then lowers the lid. She carries the box with both hands to a table where other boxes wait, labeled measured, quiet. Dorothy touches the rim of her mug with one finger and closes her eyes for a count that is not quite prayer. The studio returns to her screen, and the anchor lists the agencies that have requested materials. Court clerks will timestamp. Bar investigators will call for statements. Federal agents will ask about safety reporting and how bias interfered with it. Each noun carries a verb that has been sharpened by years. Dorothy opens her eyes, and they are clear. She does not need to cheer. She needs to keep watching until the air turns from spectacle to standard. Near the gate, the woman from the second row stands with her phone at her side, eyes on the television. She does not look at Andre. She looks where she should. The man from the fourth row has given his spot along the wall to an older couple, and now stands behind them like a bookend. The officer remains near the rope line, hands held lightly, attention somewhere between the crowd and the work that continues behind the door. The manager meets Andre's eyes for a second and then away. A quick exchange that means the same thing in any language. We are aligned. The studio pulls a clip from a conference held during a different crisis years ago, where people spoke about the separation between brand and operations, as though a line existed that could protect one from the other. They cut back to the present and do not explain the contrast. They do not need to. The analyst repeats the sentence one more time, and it feels less like commentary and more like a label you place on a drawer to remind yourself where you put the important things. Reputational risk is operational risk. The words have started to live in rooms they were never allowed to enter. Sterling finally lowers the card from the reader as if the weight has become too much for his wrist. He tries a smile at the manager, the kind of smile people use when they believe that charm is a tool for every lock. The manager does not hate him. She does not admire him. She points again to the line in the sleeve and waits. The guard watches the watch. The receptionist keeps their eyes on the desk. The camera takes everything in without flinching. In a corner behind the front desk, a small television shows the same feed on a delay. The lobby watches itself being honest. Andre lowers his gaze back to his phone. He does not type yet. He does not need to. The record is writing itself in other hands now. In a studio, in a lobby, in the quiet of a kitchen where a woman who has seen many storms knows this one by its smell. The manager steps to the counter and speaks into the microphone with the same voice she has used all afternoon. The voice of order held without arrogance. Replacement aircraft has parked, she says. Boarding will begin when the cabin is ready. She thanks the room for patience and names the rule one more time because repetition is how you teach muscle memory. Safety first. Policy next. Everything else in its place. The crowd rearranges itself into the ritual that gets people on airplanes. Groups line up. Documents appear. The stamp makes its soft thunder. In the middle of it all, the television continues to tell a different story. A story where a man who once sold certainty to clients meets a red light that will not negotiate. The assistant closes a box and places it with the others. Dorothy sips from her mug and sets it down without clink. She breathes and lets the feeling name itself again. Alignment. Andre pockets his phone without turning off the screen. The evidence he put into motion has entered a world that can carry it farther than he ever could alone. He feels the lightest touch of the card against his chest and leaves it there. He steps forward when his group is called, offers his boarding document, and walks down the jet bridge into air that smells like aluminum and soap and work. He does not look back at the television, not because he is done, but because the system is finally doing what it is supposed to do. He will meet it on the other side. The cabin held its breath, the way a courtroom does. When the clerk enters with a file, Andre stayed still in seat 3A, palms open on his thighs, eyes on the window, Where the amber streak had thickened into a clear story, he did not press the moment toward victory. He let it harden into fact. The senior mechanic returned from the jet bridge with a portable kit and the slow steadiness of someone who has rehearsed only accuracy. He did not look at the crowd, only at the skin of the left wing and then at Andre. Brief and direct. "Show me your sight line." Andre framed the view with 2 fingers on the window trim, forward of the aileron faring by a hand length. "The sheen is wrong for condensation. The rate of spread over the last minutes suggests hydraulic fluid." The mechanic nodded once. He lifted his tablet, killed glare with a small polarizing disc, and took paired photographs, one wide for orientation and one tight for texture. Each capture stamped itself with numbers that lived outside opinion. Then he stepped off with the kit, out the forward door, along the narrow ladder, to the place where the amber bead had formed its own punctuation. The cabin did not speak. You could hear the seal at the door breathe. You could hear a child ask if the plane was sick, and hear the mother answer that the plane was careful. In 2B, the woman kept her phone low and still. Lens tipped just enough to hold the timeline. In 4C, the man gave up pretending to read the safety card and stared forward, as if learning how to sit inside a process. Through the glass, Andre watched the ritual unfold with clean economy. The mechanic swabbed the bead, twisted the swab into a narrow tube, capped it, and pressed a printed label until it clicked. He held the tube against a white test card and waited for the square to speak its color. Then he slid the tube into a clear envelope, pulled a red tamper strip across the mouth, and flattened it with the heel of his hand. The ramp agent held a clipboard like a notary holds time. The pen bit the paper. One signature, a second signature, a printed minute, and a second that would not change later. Chain of custody had begun, and it lived under glass and ink. When the mechanic came back through the door, his face did not announce anything. He let the words do the work. Class 2 hydraulic leak confirmed. The cabin moved without moving. Shoulders shifted by degrees. A few mouths opened, then closed as if remembering a rule. The manager rested one hand on the galley counter and answered with a language that belonged to systems, not to tempers. "Understood. We will ground this aircraft and coordinate a swap. Please remain seated until we organize the deplaning sequence." Argument as a category left the room. Procedure took the chair. Richard stood in the forward aisle with a frown that mistook performance for authority. He pointed at his watch, at the door, at Andre, and finally at the ceiling. As if outrage could find a speaker there, he named executives with the first names a private club had taught him to use in public. He said he would call Robert. He said he would have this entire delay resolved by dinner. The security officer at the bulkhead listened without adopting any of it. His voice was level and had the timbre of a posted sign. "There is no policy for first names. There is only verification and safety and time." The words settled like a seal pressed to a flap. Richard looked past the officer at the manager. He tried another smile from the old catalog and found no buyers. The officer returned his attention to the door. The manager returned her attention to the ledger in her hand. The new rule had a voice now, and it was not his. Andre did not look at Richard. He watched the mechanic set the clear envelope into a hard pouch with shock foam and a black handle. He watched the pouch trade hands like a relay stick in slow motion. He watched the tablet record the image set, the sample number, the location, the weather, the tail number, the signatures, the minute. He felt his pulse tap once against the inside of his wrists and then steady. He was not gloating. He was not relieved. He was engaged. The captain spoke with the careful cadence of an engineer reading a promise. "We will deplane and reboard a replacement aircraft. This is a precaution rooted in safety, Please follow crew instructions. The aisle lights brightened half a shade. Overhead bins opened in a calmer rhythm than most departures ever earn. The printer in the galley coughed a narrow strip, and the manager pressed a blue stamp into its corner until the ink left a square truth. She slid the strip into a clear frame by the door. Passengers would pass it and see the record looking back at them. Richard tried one more time to pull the room into his orbit. He lifted his phone and walked it up his contact list, as if the alphabet would abandon its order. When he called, the officer gave him the same patient face one gives to weather. The woman in 2B angled her camera so that both the stamped strip and the calm of the aisle lived in the same frame. The man in 4C said, "Excuse me," to no one, and yes to gravity, as he helped a stranger lift a heavy bag. When it was their row, Andre rose without hurry. He slid his phone into his jacket pocket with the screen awake, the record living where fabric could not argue with it. He felt the cool rectangle of the platinum card against his ribs and left it where it was. He had chosen the right instrument hours ago. He was not going to swap it for a shiny wrong one now. At the door, the mechanic paused and angled his tablet so the manager could see the log without asking. Photo set attached, sample bag, number link. Time stamps in sequence, signatures complete. The initials J. Parker printed below the words as clear as a fresh lane line. "Thank you," the manager said to the mechanic, then to Andre, and then to the room that had become an audience to a better habit. "Thank fact," Andre answered, because he preferred the subject to be permanent. On the jet bridge, the air warmed into concourse breath. The metal floor made a soft sound underfoot, a hush like a curtain being pulled between acts. Passengers moved past the clear envelope in the mechanic's hand. Some did not know what they were seeing but felt the rightness anyway. Others knew exactly what it meant and let their faces show the relief of a standard finding them. A reporter in the gate area was already speaking to a camera with a practiced frown. Her producer held up a finger for time and then pointed at the stream of deplaning passengers. The woman from row 2 held up her phone and kept recording, not for spectacle, but to protect the truth from the edits that would come. A teenager whispered the flight number into a group chat and watched a tag begin to glow. The public was shifting weight. You could feel it in the way people turned their shoulders toward the evidence and away from the performance. Richard lingered near the threshold as if proximity would restore a crown. He tried to catch the manager's eye and missed because her eyes were busy catching process. He reached toward Andre as if to place the moment back inside the old game. "You have no idea what you have cost me." Andre met the sentence with the currency the day had adopted. "I know what I paid for." No heat, no volume, just the ledger line. The security officer stepped a fraction closer and tilted his head toward the concourse. "Sir, we need the doorway clear. Verification and safety and time." The order did not change. Richard floated back 2 steps, like a man pulled by a tide he had never read about. Gate agents rearranged stanchions, not to control a crowd but to shape a sequence. One agent stamped rebooked slips with the same blue square, another called operations, and said grounded, not delayed. The word had weight, and the counter did not creak under it. Andre moved to the side and let families pass. He noted the steady hand, the small courtesies, the way anger failed to find oxygen in a room full of procedure. He did not open a statement. He did not give a lesson. He stayed present while the system taught itself with ink and numbers. The mechanic and the ramp agent crossed the concourse with the sealed pouch between them like a small ark. The camera from the local station tried to follow and found only the outside of a process that did not need applause. The woman from row 2 lowered her phone and sent the clip to a file labeled Witness. The man from 4C opened his social app and deleted a half-written joke, then typed a sentence that belonged to the day. We were wrong. He was right. The plane is grounded. In the glass of the terminal, Andre caught his own reflection for a breath. A man in a gray shirt with a phone in his pocket and a card he had not used. He felt the quiet click of the next stage inside him. Protocol had shifted from private to public. The personal insult that began the morning had become a record any institution would have to meet. The language had been forced to move from status to standard. The manager announced that a replacement aircraft was inbound and that seating would follow the original order. No one argued with the order anymore. People had witnessed something better than comfort. They had watched accuracy command the room. Behind the counter, the printer coughed another strip, and the stamp found it again. The square mark came down with the same sound as before. The sound did not grow sweeter with repetition. It grew truer. Andre exhaled once and let the air leave without taking anything he needed. He did not check the headlines yet. He did not reach for the card. He watched the pouch disappear toward maintenance and thought about how a sealed bag with amber fluid could unseat a dozen soft assumptions in a single day. The chapter ended itself without fanfare. A mechanic had confirmed a Class 2 hydraulic leak. An airline had changed its language from argument to procedure. A room full of watchers had learned how to stand on the side of evidence. Andre had kept his card where it belonged and moved the weight of the day from personal to public. The next act would not be about a seat. It would be about a system meeting its own mirror. The glass tower looked the same as it had every weekday morning of his adult life, but the air around the revolving doors felt cooler, as if the building had learned a new habit overnight. Sterling reached for the card, clipped to his belt with the small flourish he practiced at country clubs, the gesture that said the world would slide open because he had arrived. He pressed the card to the reader. The reader flashed a red blink that felt personal. He turned the card and tried again, pushing air through his nose, the way schoolboys do when trying to convince physics to make room for them. Another red blink. The sound that followed was not a buzzer, not drama, only the soft denial of a system doing its job. A lobby guard in a dark blazer stepped closer with a posture that apologized for nothing. "Sir, please, step aside for a moment. These doors have always recognized me," Sterling said, smiling with teeth that belonged to smaller rooms. "Call Martin. Call Evan. Tell Dorothy I am in the lobby and we will clear this silly thing in a minute. There is no policy for first names." The guard replied, voice even and public. "There is only verification and safety and time." Sterling held the card up between two fingers like a credential in a photograph. He saw his own reflection ghosted in the glass behind it. A man rehearsed in advantages. The guard did not look at the card. He glanced at the desk where another red blink bloomed on a small screen, then back at Sterling, with the calm of someone who knows the hallway behind him is longer than the man in front of him. "We can escort you to a conference room while we verify your status," the guard offered. Sterling heard the word status and tasted copper. He leaned closer, lowered his voice to the volume used to give instructions to staff whose names he never learned. "This is a misunderstanding. Get me upstairs." The guard moved half a step, enough to show the line he would not cross. "Please step this way." They did not put a hand on him. They simply waited until silence did the work. He slid the card back onto its clip and followed. A man walking inside a story that had stopped accepting his edits. Upstairs. Dorothy stood at the window of the executive floor, watching the narrow river of morning traffic thread past the courthouse. Her hands were still, not folded, not clenched, resting on the glass as if testing its temperature. Behind her, the large screen on the credenza ran a loop of news segment. Anchors spoke in the grammar of after the fact. Crawls named agencies and committees that had not returned calls. Dorothy did not feel triumph. She felt alignment. This is what it is supposed to feel like, she thought. Not triumph. Alignment. On the screen, a former regulator stood in front of a graphic stacked with blocks of color like a hospital chart. He pointed with an open hand rather than a finger. Reputational risk is operational risk, he said, and the words landed in the room like a tool finding its place. Another expert followed with the unheeded cadence of audit language. Dashboards, early warning, duty of candor, bar rules with teeth. None of it sounded like outrage. All of it sounded like procedure. Dorothy muted the sound and listened to the building instead. Far down the hall, a copier made a soft throat-clearing noise. An elevator bell chimed and then did not open on their floor. Somewhere, a box top slid across cardboard. She could smell coffee cooling in a cup no one would finish. The assistant appeared in the doorway carrying a flat brown carton held against her chest. She was younger than the room, older than the hour. She crossed to the bookshelf and began to build a small memorial to a certain kind of career. She lifted a silver frame with 2 careful fingers and set it into tissue at the left corner. She reached for the fountain pen that had lived on Sterling's desk longer than she had worked there, paused, uncapped it to see if the nib had been cleaned, and capped it again with a small click. She laid it along the edge of the photo, as if aligning the weight of 2 different lives. She placed a leather notebook whose pages had been torn out and then replaced. She added a tie clip he never wore to court, but kept near court as a charm from an earlier century. Dorothy watched her work and felt the cost of culture, the quiet price paid by witnesses who did not ask to be in the room when a language expired. The assistant did not cry. She did not sigh. She handled objects as if they were evidence, not mementos, and that felt right to Dorothy. The past did not need reverence. It needed a chain of custody. A knock. Then the door opened to admit building security with the office manager in tow. The manager carried an envelope with the law firm logo in one corner and the weight of inevitability in the other. Dorothy signed where the line waited. The office manager set a small handheld device on the desk and pressed Sterling's name on the screen. A square icon dimmed. Access changed to words that belonged to yesterday. The lobby called. The guard's voice was gentle, never small. He is on his way up with an escort. Dorothy unmuted the television. A new voice spoke over a map of jurisdictions. Coordinated review, said the voice. Cross filings. A special master to preserve digital records. The camera cut to a courthouse step where a spokesperson said the word inquiry, the way a surgeon says incision. The screen cut again to a studio where a former ethics counsel nodded at a stack of citations like a mason testing a wall. We are watching a pivot from narrative to audit, he said. The old protection was proximity. The new protection is transparency. Sterling walked in with a version of his old posture held up by habit and caffeine. He saw the box first, then the envelope, then Dorothy standing by the window in a dress, the color of new paper. He smiled the old golf smile and let a few country club words loose into the room, a bouquet meant to disarm and bind. None of them took. Dorothy turned from the window with a face that did not announce victory or apology. In her mind, she repeated the sentence that had anchored the day since dawn. Reputational risk is operational risk. She let him come closer, and then let the envelope bridge the rest of the distance. The firm is cooperating fully with the inquiries, she said. Your access is suspended pending review. You may take personal items only. Client materials remain in place under hold. He blinked the way a man blinks when the light changes color without warning. He reached for the old phrases that had once bought him time. Misunderstanding. Optics. This will settle. Dorothy did not argue. She turned the screen toward him and pressed play. His voice filled the room, that careful half-whisper he used when he believed a microphone did not apply to him. The transcript text scrolled beneath it in unfriendly certainty. He had said the names of people as if the syllables were clearance levels. He had minimized a warning because it came from a stranger's mouth. He had laughed at a policy, as if it were a suggestion. The assistant slid the fountain pen deeper into the tissue and closed the flaps of the box with her palms. One, then the other, as if blessing a small ship. She did not look up when Sterling said her name. She picked up the frame and adjusted it so the glass would not rub. This, too, was a ritual. Security did not touch him. They arranged themselves at an angle that allowed dignity and denied leverage. The office manager placed a single page on the desk for him to sign, acknowledging receipt of personal property. The pen next to the paper was not his. He took it anyway. The point made a dry scratch across the line. He looked at Dorothy while he wrote, as if she might call the scene off, if he offered the right expression. Dorothy did not look away. She remembered the last time he had made ethics sound like flair. She remembered the way he had said priority when he meant status, and the way he had said established when he meant entitled. She thought about a gate camera and a sealed pouch with a strip of red tape and realized that the same rule held everywhere worth saving. There is only verification and safety and time. Down in the lobby, cameras waited where they always wait. The press did not shout. They asked questions with words like process and oversight and remedy. On the screen in the conference room, a panelist repeated the sentence that had become a standard by noon. Reputational risk is operational risk. The ticker beneath showed markets doing the cold math that always shows up after the polite math goes home. Sterling walked toward the door with the box in his arms and the card clipped to his belt that no longer opened more than fabric. He paused, searched for the man who used to hold the hallway open for him by first name alone, and found instead a guard who knew that names are not keys. He turned to push air through his nose one more time, as if the building might take pity on muscle memory. It did not. Dorothy stood at the window until he cleared the threshold. She watched the reflection of the lobby doors close in the glass. She listened to the building take a new breath. Not triumph, she reminded herself. Alignment. The screen behind her moved on to a segment about special masters and custody seals and the boring beauty of preserved records. The assistant set the box on a cart, placed the pen on top with a small square of folded paper under the clip so the nib would not scratch, and parked it beside the door. Dorothy reached for the remote and lowered the volume until the room held only the steady hum of air and the soft click of a timestamp printing somewhere in the stack. A culture had been told, in a language it could finally hear, that its favorite shortcuts were now detours to nowhere. Outside, the river kept threading past the courthouse. Inside, the firm adjusted itself by degrees to a weight it should have carried all along. The replacement gate faced a slice of runway, where heat wavered like a quiet argument with the air. The concourse had settled into the soft murmur of acceptance. Families nested around charging stations. A sales team shared the same update across different screens. The woman from the second row kept her phone at chest height, lens steady and patient. Behind the counter, a small printer sighed out another strip, and the agent pressed a blue stamp with the calm weight of a notary. Andre stood a few steps from the podium, phone face up, the recording indicator a steady pulse. His attention moved the way a surveyor's level moves, ticking from fact to fact until a line appears. The mechanic had sealed the pouch. The ramp lead had countersigned. Maintenance had returned a photo set with a time mark for every frame. Verification. The word settled inside him like ballast. The vice president came back from a brief call with the look of someone who understands that the next sentence matters more than the last hour. He took in the gate in one sweep that counted cameras, lines, and mood. He nodded to the cabin manager and to the security officer, then stopped in front of Andre without staging the moment. "Thank you for your attention to detail," he said in an even voice. "Our team has initiated broader inspections based on the finding. We will keep passengers informed at each step." Andre measured the man for show and found only procedure. He gave a single nod. He was not here to perform heroics. He was here to hold a line. Richard waited by the rope line with a restless heel tapping out impatience. He had made calls and left messages for people he believed owed him priority. It was new terrain to feel like a data point rather than a category. He caught Andre's eye and produced a smile that had made many deals and disguised many apologies. "You made your point," he said in a voice meant for private lounges. "Take the voucher and come up front. Let us be adults." Andre did not move. "I knew what I paid for," he said, and let silence complete the thought. The cabin manager stepped to the mic. The concourse dimmed a shade. "Thank you for your patience," she said. "Our team has confirmed a hydraulic leak on the original aircraft. In partnership with maintenance, we are swapping equipment. Boarding for the new flight will begin shortly by group. Your safety is our first priority. If you witnessed any part of the earlier interaction and wish to provide a statement, customer care will take your information at the podium." Plain language. No spin. The room answered with a collective exhale, the shared feeling you hear when adults show up. The woman from the second row lowered her phone a breath and kept recording. The man from the fourth row typed a line with no adjectives. A teenager told a parent the man in seat 3 Alpha had been right, and the parent answered that the important part was who listened when someone was right. The vice president moved into the small square of floor in front of the podium and addressed the space without claiming it. "We had an interaction on board that did not meet our standard," followed by a safety observation that has been confirmed as valid and significant. Two truths apply. We do not displace purchased seat assignments for preference, and we take safety reports seriously regardless of who makes them. We are acting accordingly. He did not begin with apology or the word inconvenience. He placed policy in public, shoulders relaxed. The room steadied. Andre let the words stand, then made a separate calculation. He glanced at the platinum card in his inner pocket and kept it there. He had not used it because the system needed to prove it could correct itself without being bullied by a title. But culture does not shift by accident. Sometimes you name the weight you can pull so that the work moves farther. He ended the recording with one clean touch and slipped the phone away. He stepped into the open space the vice president had created and kept his voice at human volume. "My name is Andre Wilson. I am the founder of Wilson Global Investments. Our firm holds a significant stake in the parent company of this airline." He did not lift the card. He did not recite numbers. He let the fact sit upright. The vice president did not flinch. He absorbed the information the way pilots absorb wind. "Thank you," he said, and the words meant more than courtesy. Richard made a small, involuntary sound, the note a person makes when rules outmaneuver reputation. He looked to the vice president as if a known name should reset the board. It did not. Facts remained fact. Context simply came into focus. Andre continued with the sentence he had carried through the morning. I am not asking for special treatment. I am asking for equal treatment, applied consistently. Today is not about a card or a portfolio. It is about a process. I am not here to take a shortcut. I am here to make sure the road is level for everyone. He returned to his place, as if returning a chair to where it belongs. He had not stolen the scene. He had named the standard and given it back to the room that would have to live by it. Screens at the gate flickered as maintenance sent through a single verified image. The agent opened it in a protected pane, a sliver of amber traced under a panel, a slim ruler for scale, a block of text with the time and the initials of the mechanic and the ramp lead. No dramatics, just the things that make opinion irrelevant. It echoed the sealed pouch and the stamped strip from earlier, the quiet ritual of chain of custody, now living in pixels. The security officer's radio murmured. He adjusted the stanchions to create a lane for statements. A small sign appeared at a folding desk that read Statements and Assistance. People drifted toward it the way water finds a lower path after one stone is moved. An older man in a faded cap approached Andre with a careful step. He spoke softly. Thank you for staying put. Andre met his eyes and answered with the same economy he had offered all morning. I knew what I paid for, and I knew what I saw. The vice president returned to the mic, speaking to operations with the public as witness. Initiate an inspection bulletin across the fleet for the relevant hydraulic assemblies. Pull the recent incident reports flagged as passenger misidentification and audit resolution times. Provide an initial readout this afternoon. He did not ask if it could be done. He created the obligation in daylight. Richard tried one last time to import the old language. He addressed the vice president with unearned familiarity. This can be handled with discretion. I know the chief. I can make this go away. There is no away. The vice president said, voice steady. There is only what we do next. The sentence settled like a stamp. A junior agent arrived from a neighboring gate with a printed summary held like a relay baton. The vice president read, showed it to the cabin manager, then folded it and placed it in his pocket. It contained identifiers, times, and a brief note that field inspection was complete. No adjectives, no story, only the spine of accountability. Andre watched the printer, the stamps, the desk where statements were logged, the woman with the lens and the man with the notes. He felt the room shift from outrage to governance. That was the reveal that mattered. Not his name, not a card. The recognition that dignity and safety are not an upgrade, they are the baseline. And enforcing them looks like this. A strip, a stamp, a sentence delivered without apology. He lifted his phone again, typed a brief message that no one at the gate would see, but many would feel in the weeks ahead. Document the process shift at origin station. Compile incident timeline with policy deviations and corrective actions. Prepare board packet with audit summary and recommendations. He sent it and put the phone away. He joined the boarding line not at the front and not at the back, but where his group belonged. A small child reached for the blue glow of the scanner, and then for Andre's sleeve. The agent scanned his pass, held it a heartbeat longer than necessary, and said thank you, in a tone that sounded like more than courtesy. It sounded like alignment. Behind him, the vice president stayed at the podium instead of retreating to a protected office. The officer kept his place near the rope line with the posture of a habit he intended to keep. The woman from the second row saved her file into a folder named Proof, and finally let her shoulders drop. The man from the fourth row sent his timestamp to a local reporter. Without adding a caption, at the aircraft door, the new crew greeted each passenger with the same sentence, "Welcome aboard. If you notice anything that concerns you, please tell us. We listen." No script notes. No stage wink. Just a practice spoken out loud. Andre stepped into the cabin and took his seat. He did not look out the window for omens. The view he carried was the room he had just left, the sound of paper and plastic and policy aligning. In a short while there would be a boardroom, and the work would change shape but not nature. Equal treatment, applied consistently. Chain of custody honored in public. There is no away. There is only what we do next. The elevator released them into a floor that smelled faintly of toner and chilled ambition. Frosted glass softened the skyline into pale geometry. A receptionist rose with practiced grace and guided them to the largest conference room, where air moved quietly and carpet erased footsteps. Andre took in the room like a flight check, registering light temperatured chair, spacing the soft tick of a warming printer somewhere behind the wall. Diana placed a slim case on the table and set beside it a sealed pouch with a red string and a white label. She did not announce it. She let the object declare itself. The vice president from the gate stood near the wall with a legal pad he had not written on. Robert Lawson sat centered at the table, tie loosened but decision tight in the eyes. Directors formed a crescent of contained weather, each with a different storm. "Thank you for coming on short notice," Robert said. "I was already at your gate." Andra answered, the sentence level and exact. "A fact is a metronome." "May we begin?" Robert asked, and the screen hummed awake. Diana clicked the remote. Title card, Incident Timeline and Policy Variance Analysis. Below it, 3 clean columns. Time, Action, Deviation or Compliance. The room straightened a degree. "We will proceed from plain side to boardroom," Diana said. "No adjectives." She tapped again and brought up the first still. An ember line under a panel, a slim ruler for scale, metadata in the corner. 10/21/37 J. Parker. She let the line land. She tapped again. 10/21/58 ramp lead initials in blue. She let the line land again. Repetition turned proof into rhythm. 10/21/37 J. Parker. 10/21/58 ramp initials. The board could pretend to argue tone. It could not argue ink. Counsel leaned forward, eyes on the seal of the pouch. "Chain of custody," Diana said. "Voice, the temperature of paper, begins at 10:41. My signature, counter signed by Andre, transferred to counsel at 11:12. Acknowledged at 11:13. The screen showed the receipt band with 3 names and 3 time. The board could pretend to argue tone. It could not argue ink. Diana pressed play. The room heard the cabin as if the plane had been folded into the walls. Michael asked for the seat with polished phrasing and the slightest impatience on the consonants. Andre answered with contract words, purchased and assigned and policy. Every syllable a lever. Richard arrived in the audio like a brand. A voice accustomed to deference and private corridors. The cabin manager attempted soft diplomacy and then called security. The moment Andre stated that he was recording, the crew voices edged toward caution. The change was audible. No annotation required. "Pause there," Robert said. The screen froze on the stance at row 3, and the angle from the woman in the second row. Robert did not ask if the scene was bad. He measured cost. Priority boarding extended. Compensation offered. Minutes burned on the ground. And then the larger cost called trust, written in silence across 100 faces. He nodded once, and Diana moved on. Footage shifted to the wing. The camera located the thin gleam, the mechanic's low practical voice, named the leak. Class 2. Not airworthy. The printer in the maintenance bay printed a label, and a gloved hand smoothed it onto plastic. The blue stamp met paper with a small, authoritative sound. 10/21/37 J. Parker. 10/21/58 ramp initials. The board could pretend to argue tone, it could not argue ink. Andre sat with stillness that had weight, but not heat. He did not watch the room for reaction. He watched the procedures touch down. Robert exhaled, an unguarded breath that belonged to a pilot hearing a checklist complete. "You asked for equal treatment applied consistently," he said, "and for safety reports to be judged by content, not by appearance." Andre replied, "We are not punishing anyone. We are removing a blind spot." The sentence hung in the filtered light and found purchase. One director cleared his throat with gentle skepticism and attempted the old calculus, "Perhaps we are seeing reporting bias." Andre looked at the chart Diana put up with a quiet nod. Incident intake by source. Resolution time by passenger status. Escalation rate against post-fact validity. The bars told a story that names could not protect. Diana said nothing while the room read. The board could pretend to argue tone, it could not argue ink. Counsel reached for the sealed drive. Diana lifted it from a small felt square and passed it across with a receipt form. Pen, click, pen bit paper. Signature, signature, signature. A tiny ritual completed itself with the dignity of a locked door. The old power had relied on rooms where nothing was written. The new power insisted that everything be written and tested. Andre opened the case and set 3 packets on the table, each with red side tabs. The cover read Dignity Protocol. Subheader, Structural Reform Requirements. He did not say proposal, he said requirements. He placed one before Robert, one before counsel, one at the far end beside the director, who had coughed on habit. Robert read with the expression of a man reading a landing checklist in turbulence. Remove visible status markers at first contact. Equal intake standard. Anonymous reporting channel. Single safety queue with equal entry weight. Measure equal response time rather than premium satisfaction. Independent oversight that reports to the board. Public progress dashboard. Consequences yoked to behaviors rather than to press cycles. Page 2 carried training. Rebuilt as behaviors and tests. Mystery audits. Clear policy at gates and on seatbacks. No displacement of purchase seats for preference, absent safety, or operational necessity. Printed where passengers can see it. The sentence landed like a posted limit that finally had a patrol car behind it. Implementation window, Robert asked. Phase 1 in 30 days. Diana said. Phase 2 in 90. Quarterly public reporting. Full adoption by year end. We provide oversight and cost share. You lead. The cadence made it harder to disagree. The board could pretend to argue tone, it could not argue ink. Counsel spoke with caution that held respect in it. This is not only customer service. Correct, Andre said. This is safety and governance. A director with engineering in his bones leaned in. What do you require today? Andre tapped the last page. A vote to adopt the protocol without dilution. An oversight committee with direct access to this board. Appointment of a special master for historical complaint review. An external auditor for the first year, 24 hours to accept in full. If not, we will call for a vote to replace leadership and implement under new management. Silence arrived and did work. It washed old phrases out of mouths. It made the room listen to air and to the printer in the hall, feeding a new strip. In that quiet, the contrast sharpened. Old power expected deference in corners. New power put rulers next to stains and stamped times on plastic and read charts in daylight. Robert did not reach for the old phrases. He looked to the vice president who had stood at the gate and spoken policy in public. He looked to counsel. He looked to the director with engineering and to the director who had coughed up habit. Then he looked at Andre. I do not need a day to agree in principle, he said. I need an hour to align logistics. And to ensure this board follows through with teeth, Andre nodded once. Diana gathered a second sealed drive labeled Appendix and placed it within reach. As they stepped into the corridor, Andre texted his team, board in session, deliver, fleet bulletin, draft, and audit query, language to operations contact. Prep press line that says, only the truth, no adjectives. The hall carried the clean scent of paper and refrigerant. Through glass, the city sharpened like a chart. Diana stood with the patience of a litigator who trusts the weight of the record. He will take it, she said. He must, Andre said. And want is the measure that matters. A paralegal emerged to request the technical appendix. Diana passed it over and guided his hand to the receipt line. Pen bit paper again. More ink. The board could pretend to argue tone. It could not argue ink. When the door opened again, the board filed back with faces that had learned a new grammar. Robert stood in the doorway without his tie, which made him look less relieved than resolved. He stepped aside so the resolution on the table could be seen before it was spoken. We accept the dignity protocol in full, he said. No dilution. Oversight seats this week. Special master today. Inspection bulletin already issued. Public dashboard within a month. Regulators will receive full cooperation. Actions must speak louder than statements. Andre said, but you have said the correct one. The vice president cleared his throat once, a human sound that bridged the gate and the boardroom. I will take the implementation lead, he said. He did not decorate the sentence. He volunteered the work. Andre extended a hand, not to celebrate a victory, but to start a build. Robert took it. Diana placed a small pack of templates on the table. Gate signage, with equal entry language. Intake forms that do not ask how important a passenger appears. Standard operating edits with one font and no exceptions. Andre drew a platinum card from his inner pocket and set it face down on the table. He did not slide it toward anyone. He did not flip it. It sat there like a challenge and a parable. I travel unannounced, he said. I will continue to. If the system only works when you recognize a name, it does not work. Understood, Robert said. The vice president stepped to the window and looked past his reflection at a runway that had not changed but had. The greeting will change today, he said. Welcome aboard. If you notice anything that concerns you, please tell us. We listen. The sentence settled like a new standard, installed in public. The old power had depended on doors and handshakes, and the word trust said quietly between men. The new power arrived as stamps and receipts and dashboards and a single card left face down, an emblem of a choice to keep power in a pocket and put principle on the table. In the corridor, the printer sighed and fed another strip. Somewhere, a pouch sealed with a click. Somewhere, a crew briefed on the new intake line. In the glass, the skyline came back into focus, as if a smudge had been wiped away. Andre closed the case. The boardroom smelled less like toner and more like work. He texted one line to the team as he stepped into the elevator. Board aligned, standard engaged. Phase 1 now. They did not celebrate with speeches. They began with work. The boardroom emptied into corridors that smelled of coffee and jet fuel and floor cleaner, and the plan left the slide deck and entered muscle memory. Andre took the stairs instead of the elevator, a deliberate choice, a quiet reminder that change holds only when it travels on foot. The vice president stood at a high desk, facing operations. He did not clear his throat twice or ask for attention. He lifted a hand and spoke in the level cadence of a cockpit announcement. The new standard is live. Equal intake. One safety cue. If a passenger notices anything, you thank them. You log it, and it enters validation without regard to status. That is the rule. A printer breathed out a warm strip. A runner tore it free. and pinned it to a cork board that had carried holiday potlucks and raffle flyers. Now the board held rules with the weight of procedure. Trainers rolled a cart past the gate agents. No pep talk, just placements and scripts. The intake button moves to the top left, so fingers find it blind. The new greeting adds one sentence at the end. Say it as if you are grateful for it, because you are. In the maintenance bay, James Parker opened a tablet and saw a queue with no crowns and no colors. Tickets arrived like small bricks of language, waiting to be tested. He addressed a semicircle of techs with a pouch and a Sharpie in his hands. Validation means we love the proof more than the story. If a catering worker smells heat, treat it as if a captain radioed it. If a child points, honor the pointing. Then prove or disprove it with tools. He slipped a sample into the pouch and sealed it. The click sounded crisp in the bare room. He wrote time in the corner and initials along the edge. The habit felt old and brand new at once. Sophia faced a row of flight attendants who had come off red eyes with dry eyes. She did not perform inspiration. She offered relief. There is no secret list anymore. There is one list: dignity first, safety always, status never at the top of the screen. If you follow the procedure, you will be back. If you drift to the old shortcuts, we will coach and measure until you do not drift. She held up a laminated card. The card was not glossy or aspirational. It was readable at a glance. A hand went up near the back. What if a loud traveler says we are treating everyone the same, as if that is a crime? Sophia answered with a small smile. Then we thank them for noticing, and we treat them the same. Andre watched from the doorway and felt the click of alignment rather than the rush of victory. He texted his team a single line: record the questions you hear. They are our map. At the first gate, the new greeting went out into the air. Welcome aboard. If you notice anything that concerns you, please tell us. We listen. It was a plain sentence, and that was its strength. No flourish to hide behind, no status code tucked inside. Just a promise a stranger could test. Illegal. Council replaced the unwritten exceptions with written denials of them. Dorothy stood in a lobby while a panel show ran on the wall. The experts had moved from hot takes to cold lines on dashboards. Intake parity, resolution parity, escalation accuracy. One analyst said out loud what the culture had pretended was not true. Reputational risk is operational risk. Dorothy did not feel triumph. She felt the quiet ease of alignment. This is what it is supposed to feel like, she thought, not praise. Fit. Then the personal ledger balanced in public. Michael arrived at the crew door with his lanyard in his hand, and duty still arranged on his face. He tapped the badge to the reader. The system answered with an indifferent chirp that belonged to no one. He turned the card and tried again, pushing air through his nose the way schoolboys do when trying to convince physics to make room for them. The door did not argue. The door simply failed to open. Security came without swagger or sorrow. They received his lanyard the way a library receives a late book. On the bench inside the locker room, his tie rack stood neat and useless. A junior attendant glanced at it and exhaled, not gloating, alignment. In the training suite across the hall, Sophia signed a simple paper and became Director of Customer Experience Transformation. No confet. A badge printed. A door opened. The room applauded once, not for personality, for procedure rising to the person who had honored it when it cost her. She looked down at the laminated card in her hand. The line about listening felt heavier today, like a tool she had been trusted to keep sharp. Anonymous audits triggered in the afternoon. 2 testers walked up to different counters with the same words about a seat track. One wore a suit. One wore a shirt that spoke loudly for a local team. The agents thanked both. logged both, and looked neither up for special handling. In the maintenance app, the tickets landed as twins born seconds apart. A tech took a torque wrench and a flashlight, confirmed the looseness, and sealed two short shavings of bright metal in a pouch. Pen-bit paper, time in the corner, initials along the edge. Stories could be debated. Ink could not. On a departure, a gate lead hesitated when a teenage boy with a board under his arm mentioned a sound in mid-cabin. The pause stretched one beat too long and the mother lifted her phone. The lead felt the old habit and the new rule fight inside her. She thanked the boy, logged the concern, and later sent Sophia a note that ended with an honest line, "I will shorten the beat." Andre boarded an economy aisle near the wing and let the new greeting wash over him like water that runs straight because someone finally leveled the sink. The captain added a plain invitation before pushback. "If you notice anything unusual, please tell us. Your eyes add to ours." The plane rolled. Light laid a clean band along the foil of the engine. A boy in the row ahead pointed at a shimmer under the slat. The attendant knelt, squared to the boy's gaze, and asked to see exactly what he saw. She logged the observation, the cockpit checked, and returned to the aisle with an answer you could live with. "Condensation today. Thank you for looking out for all of us." The mother placed a hand on her son's hair as if this moment might set his posture for years. Farther back, an off-duty mechanic scrolled the queue and saw a catering report of a warm electric smell near an avionics bay. The old system would have sorted that to later. The new system sent it to validation now. A chafed wire sleeve came into view under a lamp. A pouch clicked. A label stuck. A life remembered what diligence feels like in the body. By evening, a public page lit with starting numbers. Intake parity moved toward a line. Response time variance bent down like a frame straightened after years of being just a little off. Sophia circled outliers on a whiteboard. She did not scold stations. She scheduled practice. 20 minutes at shift start, shadowing for new agents, briefings with security to remove threat language from scripts. She took a photo of the board and sent it with 3 words. "We track truth." Andre crossed the concourse and paused at a wall where marketing had once lived. A facilities worker mounted a small frame and slid a page inside. The paragraph looked like the back of a safety card. It said, "Purchase seats would not be displaced for preference absent safety or operational necessity." It said how to report concerns. It said what would happen next. The worker snapped the frame shut and wiped off a thumbprint with the tail of his shirt. He did not know he had hung a pocket-sized constitution between a coffee stall and a jet bridge. He only knew he had done the job right. Richard moved through a different corridor. Voice pitched to that old airport frequency that used to part people like curtains. The crowd did not part. A reporter asked for an apology, and he offered shape without content. A janitor lifted his mop and let him pass with neither deference nor malice. Old vocabulary looked for a private lounge and found public light instead. Night drew a thin line across the windows. In the maintenance bay, a young tech sealed a final pouch and wrote time in the corner with careful letters, because she had watched a clip of pen-biting paper and understood that a sound like that means safety. In a break room, a senior attendant copied the new greeting into a notebook and underlined the last 2 words. "We listen." He closed the book and tucked it under his arm like a map. At the curb, Andre texted a line to the team. "Phase 1 landing. Begin Phase 2. Audit cadence weekly." He slid the phone into his pocket beside a card that had stayed face down for a reason. The point was never who he was. The point was what the system did when it did not know. He looked back once at glass and light, and people moving through lanes designed to carry weight, and felt the steady fatigue of work done in the right order. Tomorrow would bring audits and arguments and numbers that still needed to bend. Tonight brought the knowledge that a boy who pointed, and a mother who trusted him, and a catering worker who spoke up, and an agent who shortened the beat, and a mechanic who sealed a pouch, and a vice president who chose the hard job, and a passenger who stayed in his seat, had all joined the same system and made it a little harder to mistake confidence for truth. That was the payout. That was the promise. That was how change keeps flying. He moved through the terminal like any other traveler, a quiet figure in a tide of rolling bags and soft announcements. Morning light slanted through tall panes and laid pale ribbons across the polished floor. The air held coffee, disinfectant, and the faint metal tang of moving belts. Where a luxury poster used to advertise exclusivity, a plain notice sat under glass. The font was spare. It said purchased seats would not be displaced for preference, except for safety or true operational need. It said how to report a concern, where that report would go, and what would happen next. A cleaner wiped a fingerprint from the corner and did not linger. The promise did not need flourish. It had a path. Andre paused and read the lines once more, as if to check that words still matched the world. They did. The feeling that rose was not triumph, but alignment. Policy had been taught to walk. He continued toward his gate. A boy with a zigzag suitcase wobbled past, hand in his mother's hand, eyes bright to the windowed wing of a resting jet. The boy tugged and pointed. The mother knelt to his angle without hushing him. "Thank you for noticing," she said. "Let us tell someone." The gate agent bent to the boy first and asked him to show exactly where. The agent logged the note and spoke a simple thanks, as if writing it were not an exception but a habit. A small thing, and the most important thing. At the end of the concourse, a simple desk held sealable pouches and 2 pens with thick barrels. A technician wrote a time in the corner of a form, and her initials along the edge. The pen bit paper and left a faint groove. She slid a swab into a pouch, pressed the label flat with a thumb, and placed it in a tray that had no special slot for status. The tray did not know names. It knew order. The boarding call for his flight was a clean, unhurried cadence. The agent delivered the greeting he had argued for, and then stepped back to let it belong to the crew. "Welcome aboard. If you notice anything that concerns you, please tell us. We listen." The sentence did not ask for trust. It earned it by inviting proof. He took a seat in the middle of the cabin. He did not scan for recognition, and he did not signal rank. Belt clicked, bag braced, hands resting easy on his knees. A tall man in the next row folded his jacket into 2 exact squares and tucked it flat. A woman at the window rubbed a smudge from the plastic shade, as if one small control helped her accept the larger ones. The crew worked the aisle with a calm that was not slow, only exact. In the old way, service had been a guessing game about signals of wealth and familiarity. In the new way, the questions were precise and the answers were short. A woman 2 rows ahead asked about a medication that needed to keep cool. The attendant did not look at her shoes or ring or ticket. She listened, named the need, and solved it in 3 sentences. There was relief in the lack of weighing. When the scale is removed, the lift is light. Pushback thudded through the floor. The wing caught the sun and threw it forward like a clean blade. The captain spoke with no theater. "If you see or smell anything unusual, please tell us. Your eyes add to ours." The line settled into the cabin like ballast. People shifted, not in worry, but in readiness, the light readiness of being included. The jet climbed. A boy across the aisle saw a shimmer near the slat and whispered, "Too soft to carry." The attendant noticed the angle of his chin, knelt to meet his gaze, and asked him to show exactly where. He drew a crescent on the glass with the tip of his finger. The attendant thanked him and made a note. A moment later, the captain stepped out, walked down the aisle, looked himself, and smiled at the boy. The way a teacher smiles when a student passes a lesson by looking closely. Condensation today. He said, "Thank you for looking out for us." The boy sat taller. His mother exhaled in that quiet way that means the world has not only seen a child, but trusted him. Andre felt the slow satisfaction of a system that feeds on the right things. His phone buzzed once in his pocket. A message from Sophia said that intake parity had reached 9 in 10 across all hubs this week, with the outliers flagged and training already scheduled. Another note from James said 2 recent fixes had come from catering reports, 1 frayed sleeve and 1 loose bracket, both captured and closed. He typed 3-word, "Keep the groove." Level flight brought the soft choir of pages turning, keys tapping, lids lifting. A baby sounded 1 trial cry and then surrendered to a thumb and a song. It would have been easy to drift into the old habit of replaying hurts. He did not let himself. He made his memory a ledger, not a shrine. He let names rise of people who chose the long work once cameras lost interest. Thomas, who took the lead when he could have delegated to save his calendar. Dorothy, who nodded once at a television panel and understood that a sentence about risk could be a hinge for a culture. James with his tablet, his push, and the quiet sentence he repeated like a catechism. Validation loves proof more than story. Sophia, who knew before anyone that the shortest path to dignity is to make it the default option. He also allowed himself to think of Michael not as a villain to keep polished, but as a warning the old system had trained and rewarded. The badge had chirped, and the door had not moved. The consequence was clean. There was talk that he had sat through a full day of training and listened more than he spoke. Andre did not chase the talk. A reform that exists to punish is a campaign. A reform that exists to remove the need for punishment is a system. When the cart reached him, he asked for water. The attendant handed it over and glanced at a small checklist glowing on her device. She looked back and said softly, "Thank you for your patience while we learned new ways to do the right thing." He shook his head. "Thank you for making the new way, the usual way." Her smile was not staged and not large. Then she moved on. He opened a notebook. He liked paper when the mind needed lines more than dots. He wrote 3 headings: listening, evidence, care. Under listening, he sketched a small addition to test in the greeting, a sentence that made the invitation to report also an invitation to remain human with one another. Under evidence, he drew a square and filled it with an arrow, his old shorthand for chain of custody. Under care, he copied the sentence Sophia had said in the first week, when a senior agent had resisted logging a child's observation. The goal is not to be perfect now. The goal is to be unable to imagine the old way later. He closed the book and let the wing take his gaze. Light thinned to the pale of a late morning washed by high cloud. A soft shadow crept and withdrew across the metal as the aircraft trimmed. Beneath the steadiness, he felt the old ache that never quite left. The one that had formed on a day when a young man in grief had been moved out of a purchased seat to make room for comfort, dressed as entitlement. The ache did not stab, it steadied. He let it inform, and refused to let it consume. Descent brought the land up in squares and slivers of silver water, and the straight lines of roads pointed at other lives. The wheels met the runway with a firm answer. At the gate, he did not stand early and lean on the seat in front of him. He waited for the row to breathe. He thanked the crew with the same tone he would have used for a partner. The jet bridge brought cool air that smelled faintly of paint and rain. In the baggage hall, A television with low volume carried a panel from an industry summit. Executives who used to speak the language of clubs now used the language of process. A captain told a story about a catering worker whose report caught a fault before it became a failure. A consumer advocate pointed to a dashboard and said that what we call reputation is part of operations now, not a decoration for them. No one said the name of the incident. No one used his name. Good. He thought, if a change needs a face to keep working, it never learned to stand. Outside, sky showed a clean ribbon of blue between soft stacks of cloud. A driver held up a tablet with his name spelled right. Andre lifted a hand and smiled, and joined the line for taxis instead. He liked the ordinary patience of lines. They had their own quiet justice. When his turn came, he gave an address and let the city hold him in its noise. That night he stood at a window in a quiet room above the lights and watched buildings blink on in slow tears as if lungs remembered how to fill. On the table lay a folder for the morning, a short talk for students who thought in plans. He did not plan to tell his story. He planned to ask a question and leave a sentence. Think about how rules are worth little until they are performed by ordinary people in ordinary rooms, with ordinary pens and plain pouches and printers that click out times. Practice is policy. He wrote the line at the bottom of the page and set the pen down. The phone buzzed one more time. Sophia again. The greeting changed at several stations today without a script in sight. People caught themselves and adjusted. He sent 3 words back. Keep that going. Then he turned the phone face down, not for show, simply to be in the room he was in. He slept. In the morning, he flew again, not as a test, not as a hidden audit, simply as a person who needed to move through the air. The greeting came, the cabin settled. A child pointed. En attendant listened. A captain thanked him. A mechanic sealed a pouch. A pen bit paper. A system held. He did not bless it. He did not claim it. He joined it. The rule kept its quiet promise. At its heart, this story is not about airplanes, policias, or procedures. It is about dignity. It reminds us that justice doesn't always roar in the courtroom or shout on the streets. Sometimes it speaks quietly, through people who choose to do the right thing when no one is watching. True change begins not with grand gestures but with everyday actions. Listening before judging, treating everyone with equal respect, and refusing to let arrogance silence compassion. In a world still wrestling with prejudice and power imbalance, this story asks each of us to remember that gold doesn't fear the fire. Integrity, like truth, survives the heat. It also challenges us to see that silence is not always peace. It can be the breeding ground of harm. Breaking that silence, standing firm against what's wrong, or even simply refusing to look away, can realign an entire system. You reap what you sow isn't just a saying here. It's a reminder that every small act of fairness, every moment of empathy, plants the seed of a culture that listens, learns, and grows stronger together. If this story resonated with you, if it made you reflect on times you stayed silent or stood tall, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us your story of courage or of finding your voice. Don't forget to like the video to support these stories that shine a light on real change. And subscribe so you won't miss the next one. May you carry with you a quiet strength, the kind that listens deeply, acts justly, and brings peace where noise once lived. May your days ahead be steady, grounded, and full of light.